What's with teenage boys and refusing stimulants? Yeah, so ADHD, you gotta love it. So ADHD comes in three different types: the inattentive type, where you don't pay attention; the hyperactive impulsive type, where you're kind of all over the place and moving nonstop and doing moving and grooving nonstop; and then the combined type, which is where you have features of the inattentive type and features of the hyperactive impulsive type. And so most teenagers will kind of outgrow their impulsivity, so they're not jumping around and jumping off furniture. I mean, some boys do because they're them, but quite a few people outgrow that part. And so when it comes to the inattentive part, that part can stick around depending on your genes and situation and stuff like that. And so I do have a slew of teenage boys because I just have a lot of teenage boys in my clinic, and they are on stimulants. And it's so funny. It feels like a universal thing is that I'll get a teenage boy in my clinic and things are going great with their medicine until it's not. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what did the medicines don't really stop working? There's something to this. And after you go through all the layers, you talk to the parents, talk to the kid, and when you really dig down deep, the kiddos will start complaining about the most common side effect of a stimulant, which is appetite suppression. And so we know stimulants ruin your appetite. We know this. It's something that we do as part of the informed consent process. So, in other words, we walk parents and most teenagers through the side effects of these medicines, so that then they know what's coming, because it's coming, because that is the main side effect of a stimulant. So I literally tell everybody, and especially teenage boys, hey, if you take the stimulant, you're not going to have an appetite for a certain amount of time, because that's just what happens. Now, of course, caveat, some kids don't have any effect on their appetite, but in general, I mean, just off the cuff, I'd say 80%, 90% of kids that I see do. Anyway, and so I'll tell them, "Hey, teenage boy, make sure you eat, because if you don't eat when the medicine wears off, you're going to be hangry, and nobody wants to be around a hangry teenager because they're like almost insufferable. Like you can't deal with them because they're doing the most and all over the place." All right, so there's that. Well, here's the hiccup, especially for teenage boys, is that if you use a version of the medicine that lasts through lunch, so in other words, there are formulations of these medicines that you can take just once a day, which means it's going to be still active over lunch, which means you're not going to have an appetite over lunch. They have teenage boys have a very difficult time with that. And at first I'm like, I mean, why? I mean, is it really that big a deal? I mean, you're of an age where you can eat even if you're not hungry. Like you can sit down and say, I'm not really hungry, but I know I need to eat, so I'm gonna eat the sandwich, right? For whatever reason, that bothers them and they can't do it. Some of them. And the other part is eating is kind of a social ritual. So if you think back to when you were in high school, going to lunch was a time to be with your friends, and for teenagers, it is super, super important that they stand out, but not too much, right? So they want to eat what their friends eat, but not the exact same thing, but it can't be so weird as to be weird. And so it's this delicate social dance that we do as a especially American society and especially American teenagers. So when you give a stimulant, you ruin their appetite. It literally causes a social issue because they would sit at the table, and if they're not eating, then what are they doing there? And there's a kind of social awkwardness to that. And yeah, and it causes a real problem, y'all, like an actual legitimate real problem. And I always have to remember, my experience is not everybody's experience. I'm not a magician. I don't know everything. And I try not to downplay other people's feelings. But for a while, this is when I would kind of go, "What? Why are we talking about this?" But now that I mean, I've seen it again and again and again. And so what we do now is we work with the teenager, work with the parents to find formulations of those medicines that don't disrupt their lunchtime appetite as bad. And for some kids, we literally have to take them off of it. Like they're just like, this is not working. I want to eat. I like eating. The active eating, the social active eating, the feeling of being full feels good. Being able to eat certain things because teenagers love carb rich stuff, and so Yeah, all of those things play into it. And so it's fascinating to watch teenagers potentially risk their academic career because they can't focus and concentrate just to eat. So it's a phenomena. There is no one right answer. The key is make sure you talk to your psychiatrist or pediatrician or family doctor, like whoever's writing meds, and then working with your teenager to find that happy medium. And then if you're a teenager listening to this, quit being ridiculous. I'm kidding. Really do your best to work with your team so that you can get the best risk benefit balance for your situation. Because again, we don't want to take your appetite away, but we also don't want you to fail out of pre-cal so that you can go off to school or trade school or get a job or whatever you're doing. So it's all about risk and benefit. And so when in doubt, talk to your doctor.